he was on a certain pathway to become prime minister, and then bang, through no fault of his own really, and certainly no great work by his opponent, but all because of what's been happening in the US, everything has completely changed. I would imagine he's feeling very frustrated, isn't he?
Well, I have had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Poilievre on multiple occasions. He never took his victory for granted. He's certainly not happy with what's happened on the Trump side. But I mean, if you're going to be the leader of a country, then you're going to have to deal with the unexpected.
The interesting thing about America at the moment is it's run by two people in terms of Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
Jordan Peterson has a great interview here with Piers Morgan and talks about politics, tariffs, Canada, and Elon Musk. And he really gives some foundational things in which he has to say in regards to politics. And these are some things that are incredibly rational and intelligent, but that would absolutely have the left blow a gasket and make their head explode. But check this out and watch this video here. Make sure you like to subscribe. This is a really good one.
Pierre Poilievre actually feel about this? Because he looked like he was on a certain pathway to become prime minister, and then bang, through no fault of his own really, and certainly no great work by his opponent, but all because of what's been happening in the US, everything has completely changed. I would imagine he's feeling very frustrated, isn't he?
Well, I have had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Poilievre on multiple occasions, and you know, he never took his victory for granted. One of the things he insisted upon when he was speaking with me was that he was going to campaign continually until the election on the assumption that things could shift radically in a sideways direction, and that his apparent lead was not something he would rely on. And I think he has done that. And he's certainly not happy with what's happened on the Trump side, and that is but I mean, if you're going to be the leader of a country, then you're going to have to deal with the unexpected, and I think he's done a credible job of that. Part of Poilievre's problem too is that communication problem, let's say, is that the Canadian legacy media, particularly the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, very much similar to the BBC, is state-funded and very much inclined to favor the ever-ruling Liberals, particularly because Poilievre has threatened, and I think he means it, to defund the CBC, which is an institution that royally deserves being defunded. It's incompetent to the core. But Poilievre is having a hard time communicating with Canadians, especially older Canadians who tend to get their news from the CBC, let's say, and assume that it's reliable like it was 30 years ago. And so he's facing that as an obstacle as well. And then he's also facing the fact that it's a very deep temptation for Canadians to parade themselves as morally superior to the evil and unpredictable Yankees to the south. And certainly the Liberals have been capitalizing on that and terrifying people about Trump and telling everyone that our relationship with the US is over, which is a preposterous claim in many ways, although Canada definitely needs to differentiate and make more sophisticated its economic structures. I mean, we're far too dependent on the Americans, and Trump is also, in some ways, to give the devil his due, pointing that out to Canadians. And one thing he said, and he said this to other countries in the world too, is that if you can't really bring anything to the negotiating table, if you have no real power, then why should we pay any attention to what it is that you are asking for or claiming? And I would also put that absolutely 100% firmly at the feet of the Liberals, who are hypothetically likely to rectify this now, because their policies have been, for example, there's no east to west pipelines in Canada to speak of, and that's definitely a Liberal, that's Liberal doing. And Carney says he'll rectify that, but he was the author of those policies to begin with. And the other thing he's done that's so treacherous, like truly treacherous, is to present himself as an outsider. And what he means by that, I suppose technically, is that he's never been elected, which, you know, is a dangerous thing for an actual prime minister of a country. But he's been a key economic advisor operating both in front of and behind the scenes in Canada for the last decade. And he's a man that's responsible in large part for the policies that have made Trump able to do exactly what he has done to Canada over the last month and a half. You know, if you're so damn daft that you've got no power when you come to the negotiating table, especially when you're dealing with the superpower Americans and, you know, madman deal-making Trump, then it's not surprising that you're going to find yourself at a loss and not holding the appropriate cards. And maybe Canadians have woken up to that to some degree, but they're definitely turning to the wrong man to solve the problem. So what's Poilievre is attempting to put forward his pro-working class policies, and he's very popular among young Canadians who should have a say in their future, but the saber rattling by the Americans has definitely worked to a staggering degree in favor of Mark Carney and the Liberals. And Canadians are deluded enough to think that he's a new guy, and he's not. He's the worst of the old, that's for sure, you know. And
Jordan Peterson here is just making some articulate political observations with his understanding about Trump and how Trump is essentially telling countries that if they want deals and if they want to negotiate, put your cards on the table. And if you don't have negotiating power, then you can't really negotiate anything. And Jordan Peterson on this Piers Morgan interview is seeing that as an observation. And then he's critiquing Canada about the problems that they're having, as well as the new person in charge that they're getting ready to put in, and how they have a gas problem. And that particular prime minister or president that they're going to put in Canada is completely anti-fossil fuels. And it's a unique problem that they're having in Canada. And Jordan Peterson right now is giving praise to Trump on how he's doing it. Let's continue listening to this interview to see how Jordan Peterson makes more observation on the Trump and Elon Musk situation as well.
The interesting thing about America at the moment is it's run by two people in terms of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who I would imagine from a psychoanalysis point of view would be just about as fascinating a subject as you could possibly get. We've talked about Trump, but what do you make of Elon Musk and the whole Doge thing, but also the vicious reaction from the woke left, who of course originally had him as their green energy savior?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if half the money that the American government spent, the Canadian government as well, the British government, governments as such, is like utter waste. And worse than that, like positively counterproductive. And it's certainly the case that Musk is the kind of managerial businessman who's very detail-oriented. He's an engineer. Engineers know how things work from the atoms upward. I have many engineers as friends, and I've watched them run companies, and the good ones know everything about how their enterprises operate, and they pay attention to every detail. And Musk is definitely one of those people. And we know that because he's done 5 impossible things at least. And then he bought Twitter and he cut its staff by 75% and made it work better, despite the fact that his advertising base collapsed. And he did that despite the fact as well that everyone thought it was a mad move, you know, economically and practically. And so I think it's great that Musk and his team of, you know, brilliant young engineers are going through the budget line by line, trying to figure out where all the idiot money goes. And I think the left is appalled by that because they've set up an entire network of so-called non-governmental agencies, organizations, NGOs, that are essentially funded by taxpayer money that run their, you know, quasi-criminal radical enterprises all around the world. And now the gravy train has ceased to operate. And so it's not surprising they're unhappy about that. But thank God for that, as far as I'm concerned, especially given the catastrophic levels of debt that the American government, Western governments everywhere are carrying. This is absolutely necessary. And for some reason, the left is skeptical of big business because they don't trust capitalists, even though capitalists have made the world wealthy and almost eradicated absolute poverty all around the world, especially since the Berlin Wall fell, and done that far more cleanly than socialist or communist governments everywhere by a huge amount. Apparently, the radicals think that big government is trustworthy, even though big is the problem. And they believe that because good thinking moralists like themselves are in charge and have the wisdom and the intelligence, and this is also what Carney believes fervently, to believe that they could operate by central planning principles and make the world a much better place. And we know what happens when that happens, Pierce. We know what's happened to Germany, where energy prices are 5 times what they should be, and they cause more pollution than they did 10 years ago before these idiot green policies were put in place. Then there's you characters in the UK, and you guys can't even make steel anymore. And if you think that's progress, well, then you deserve the poverty that's coming down the pipes at you very, very rapidly. And there's no evidence whatsoever that any of these policies have produced even the tiniest transformation in levels of carbon dioxide output, not in the least, especially not with China and India thinking that the West has gone out of its mind absolutely and, making their own way forward to an industrial future. And the whole bloody climate thing is a scam from top to bottom anyways. And everything about it is a lie. And that's a terrible thing to understand. And people don't want to understand that, and no wonder. But that doesn't mean it isn't true.
Beautifully said by Jordan Peterson. The left is so scared of Elon Musk that is ridiculous. Elon Musk is one of those individuals that the left championed for a long time. And now that he is using his intelligence and engineering skills to go and balance the budget in the government, the left is absolutely losing their mind, which is irrational and nonsensical, because at the end of the day, if you ask explicitly to the left or anybody of that nature, would you want to balance the budget in the government? Everyone's answer would be yes. But for some reason, now that Elon Musk has been in this administration and has sided with Trump, and they've been working together to try to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, that now this is the biggest problem in America. This is the most wrong thing that these two individuals could do, which is ridiculous. And Jordan Peterson really takes the knife and cuts through the butter with this. Hope you like this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. See you on the next video.